welcome to Literary Prospects, where we talk to authors and literary professionals about books, publishing, and the writing life. I'm Kelley Vick. I'm the host of the program, and in just a moment, it will be my pleasure to introduce today's guest. But first, a reminder that if you like what you hear, please do take a moment to subscribe. It helps us out, and you can make sure you never miss an episode. Also, we've opened a Literary Prospects shop, so if you're looking for bookish shirts, totes, and gifts, please check that out at literaryprospects.etsy.com. And to grab books featured on the podcast and check out more curated book lists, you can visit the Literary Prospects bookstore on bookshop.org. We'll leave all those links below in the show notes. And now, let's introduce today's guest. Author Emily Locker spent most of fourth grade persuading her friends to reenact scenes from Sweet Valley High. The YA rom-com Running Mates is her first novel. When Emily's not writing or chasing her two young sons, she works as a therapist in private practice. She currently lives in Washington, D.C. with her family. Emily Locker, thank you so much for joining us today, and congratulations on your debut YA rom-com, Running Mates. Publishers Weekly calls Running Mates a charming, fast-paced, and heartwarming story of young love facing political discord and parental expectations. Locker captures the complexities of ideology meeting real life. Midwest Book Review says Running Mates is a novel perfect for modern times. Locker's ability to evolve not just a political perspective, but a personal one, which is still able to embrace love and relationships, makes this for a remarkably non-judgmental, compelling coming-of-age saga that all ages will appreciate. And the New York Times bestselling author Jessica Goodman calls it tender, big-hearted, and totally funny. We could go on, but I'll leave it there for now so that we can talk with you. What can you tell us about Running Mates?
Okay. So I think that captured it really well. They're kind of a snapshot would be it's a modern day Romeo and Juliet where the main character Anna is a liberal and from a very progressive liberal family, and she finds herself falling for Gabe, who's the son of a Republican senator's son, and chaos ensues.
Chaos ensues. Um, what was the inspiration for this story? How did this one come to you?
So this is the first book that I'm getting published, but it was not the first one I wrote. I've had a lot that did not work out.
I love that distinction. We'll talk about that a little more later.
And so in those, a lot of the feedback I got was, we love the chemistry between the characters or we love the dialogue, but there's not enough of a hook for a debut novel. And so I was like, I need a hook, I need a hook. And then I had started to write like, I love an enemies to lovers trope. It's one of my favorites. And I'd started to think about that. And I moved back to DC around the time I was writing this, and in my son's pre-K class. So I have two boys. And at the time, this was 2 years ago, one was 5 and one was 2. And so we were entering the 2s back into DC. My whole family's from DC. My husband's family's from Bethesda. And so we were kind of coming back home essentially. And I go into the nursery school class and we have an old speechwriter for President Obama and an old speechwriter for Mike Pence in the same class. And I was like, how is this going to work? Through the year, there's parent events and there's kid events and everyone got along so well. And that's kind of where the idea came from. What happens when you're really next to someone you're supposed to hate or disagree with, right? It's really hard to hold on to those notions when you're in the same community as somebody.
And the other part of this is why these two characters are thrown together is sports.
Yes.
Right. So
Yep.
how did that come into play?
Because when I started to write it, I was like, how am I going to get them to continue to interact? And I was like, what is more unifying than a sports team, right? What happens on sports teams where you have a same goal or same trajectory in mind, and how that you train together, you practice together, and there's similar goals. And so I was like, that seemed to be the perfect place. But since high school sports are not the same gender usually, right? That's not happening. I was like, I needed a different forum. So I kind of, she's on the track team, he's on the lacrosse team, but they joined this running conditioning program for students who are going to be considered for like college athletics. And I made it really intense. Like this, like famous coach comes and is training them. So there's this real intensity to it. And you have to be kind of a team and push each other along.
You mentioned that you live in DC,
Yeah.
which is obviously quite a political hotspot, even at the preschools.
Yes.
Politics plays a big role in this novel, as we've talked about. But you chose to set your novel in what I believe is a fictional town
Yes.
in
That's
in
100%
in,
fictional.
in North Carolina. Why North Carolina? Why this setting?
So I think I was thinking kind of a town that would be, represent the division in the country where half the town, so in Eggerstown, North Carolina, again, fictional, um, half the town, literally half the town, the east side is liberal and the north side is conservative. And it's even reflected on the main street where the east side of the shops are like local honey stores, a local bookstore, and the conservative half is more big box luxury or other stores.
Mhm.
And I thought that was like a great representation of what's happening in our country, but also I was kind of thinking of like where would you have such a divide? And I think I was kind of thinking of like the Research Triangle in North Carolina, where you
Mhm.
have because in the in my book there's a small liberal arts college and a hospital that kind of a lot of the East Side people work for, and I think in the South. So I grew up going to Memphis twice a year, even though I grew up in DC because my mom's sister married a Southern gentleman,
Mhm.
and I used to remember walking with my Uncle Mark um, around Memphis, and you'd go, hi, hi. You'd say hi to every single person, which I thought was fascinating because I'd never been somewhere where you literally say hi to everyone, and everyone knew each other, and everyone had a backstory. So as soon as they passed by, my Mark would be like, well, guess what this person did? And there's something about that community where everybody knows everybody that I thought was like I'm really drawn to that as a setting for fiction, especially for kind of rom-com fiction.
Oh yeah, it works great.
Yeah.
In addition to this coming of age love story between two very different characters, um, the book is also a kind of love letter to independent bookstores and booksellers.
Yeah.
Uh, what inspired you to include this element
Yeah,
in the
I think
story?
yeah, I was thinking that, it was hard for me to think of an issue that would work with what Annabelle, the main character, has to kind of go against her friend group to make room to fall in love with Gabe. And I was trying to think about what is an issue that both we as readers could connect to with some nuance, but that Annabelle would struggle with. And I think, for instance, actually tomorrow, I'm going to be at Politics and Prose, my independent bookstore in Washington, D.C., and I'm going
Mhm.
to do a book talk there. And, part of the reason that happened, it's a pretty big bookstore in D.C., but
Yeah.
why they are doing, like, I would never be able, I love Barnes and Noble, I love all bookstores, but I would never be able to waltz into Barnes and Noble and have this happen. They knew me because my kids go there all the time. They've helped my kids pick out books. So when I came in with my advanced reader copy, someone was actually willing to really give it to the book buyer there. And
Mhm.
that's because they knew me and they knew my kids. And, I think bookstores and reading and libraries are really kind of, special community spots, and you can have really special relationships there, right? So
Yeah. 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 And where do your characters come from in your work? Do you find that you tend to base them on particular people or composites of people that you've been in contact with in your life, or do they come from somewhere else completely different?
I think definitely the main character, Annabelle, has some elements of me, kind of, says what she's thinking, maybe
Mhm.
even when she shouldn't, is emotional, but very tied to her family and her friends. But I mean, I'm not just like her. She's an exaggerated version, more kind of emotional, more, more, a little more impulsive than I am. And I think Gabe to me I'm a huge romance reader. I've always been, I love the genre. And to
Mhm.
me that, part of having that kind of lead is like he's the escape. There's saying a dreamboat about him. And so that I think comes from all my romance reading and just like kind of, you know, the escapist element in romance. And then Annabelle's two moms, but I think Mimi, one of the moms, is basically is off my dad, kind of. He always makes kind of cedar plank salmon and big dishes. And my mom, she's not just like the other mom, but she kind of, there are elements of her too, where, both I'm very close to my parents. And it would, and imagining being in a close family, like it can be harder to, do things differently than they are, right?
Yeah, yeah, and you chose the first person perspective
Yeah.
for
Right.
this book. Why were you drawn to the first person?
I think especially in I characterize this more as like a beach read, as a
Mhm.
romantic comedy, and to really be in that space, you want to be in the character's head. Again, the escape of this kind of experience of being in a rom-com, you are supposed to be really at one with the main character.
Mhm.
I think I'm definitely interested. The only other point of view I think I would be interested in is a dual point of view when you have the girl, boy, girl, or who are the two romance leads, whatever their gender are,
Mhm.
back and
Mhm.
forth. But I think for for especially non-literary fiction, it's almost important, right, to be in the character's head, and really aligned with the main character.
What draws you you've said that you love romance and have always loved reading romance. What draws you to the romance genre?
Well, what? I've loved romance since like day one, pretty much. I remember I say this in my author bio, but I used to make my friends reenact scenes from Sweet Valley High. And and then even when I was 13, I somehow found Nora Roberts, which this was before there was like a Rift Bodice bookstore. This was before romance, has this huge movement behind it now.
Oh, yeah.
There were not other people reading, especially my age in DC, reading Nora Roberts, so I think it was like really, uh, you know, I loved the romance. I loved the escape. I love knowing there's a happily ever after. And, I really was like, why do I always love this? I was, stay up till 2 in the morning reading. And when I was in college at University of Rochester, I was writing my history thesis at a senior year, and I wrote about how this kind of combined my psychology and history. But I wrote about how in World War One, what we'd now call PTSD, but then was shell shock, when the soldiers came back, they'd formed Jane Austen book clubs. And why they did that was to help the soldiers, know there was a happily ever after, but also go back into a world where there was clear order, right? And the comfort of that. So I think that like really drew together why I love romance.
That is fascinating. There's a clear order. Wow, well, that kind of ties into another question that I have for you, which is you are a therapist
Mhm.
as well as a writer. You work in private practice. How do you think being a therapist informs your writing?
I think a big way it informs it is that I spend my day in other people's heads and emotions in a way I think
Mhm.
most people don't, right? When we interact with adults, we're seeing some sort of mask in place, right? You know,
Mhm. Mhm.
kids, you see it all as it comes. If they don't get what they want, they're on the floor. But by the time we're adult, we have enough shame in place
Mhm.
to be socially appropriate. And shame is good and bad, right? Too much shame is bad, but we need some amount of shame to kind of keep up with our social contract in the world, right? And so, but in the therapy in those sessions, which you really are seeing, the mask off. And I think that allows me to create a richer internal emotional world. Even though I treat 18 and up, teenagers are often are, teenagers are the height of this, like the emotions, the up and down, the, you know, roller coaster. So I think that
Mhm.
really allows me to do the internal world, um, with more fluency.
Do you think that it influences how you approach writing as a writer as well?
I don't think it approaches how I'm the way one way it approaches how I'm writing is because since I work full time and have two small boys, it approaches my M&M and espresso consumption at 10 o'clock at night, which is when I do this. I think one thing is that you look, especially I treat a lot of people who are college and in their 20s, and you know getting stuck, right, which can
Mhm.
happen in the writing process. What allows someone to be unstuck? And I think that probably has given me some more tools to keep pushing on, keep writing, you know,
Mhm. Mhm.
face the rejection, because I think I see the benefits of not giving up, of you know not romanticizing the writing process either, like romanticizing. Often we romanticize adult life as children. What it'll be like to fall in love, to be independent, to get to go shop, but adult life is
Whatever
hard.
you want.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, adult life is nuanced, right? And so I think it can feel disappointing. And like, how do you not romanticize things and still enjoy them? So writing is not always a romantic process. It's not like you're in a bit of creative energy. It's often pushing yourself when you just want to do something else or surf the internet or go to bed or read a romance novel.
Yeah. What was the road to publication
Oh my
like for you?
Okay. So
Take us through.
okay. So so thank God I love being a therapist, thank goodness, because this would have been a really hard process. So And I actually had something kind of magical happen that makes this all full circle last week too, um, which is that so when I before I went to grad, my parents are both therapists.
Mhm.
Actually, my husband's parents are both therapists too, so we're like a lot of mental health in the family. But I was always interested in kind of. I also wanted to be in private practice, but I was like before that, I want to try different things. So after college, I moved to New York City. I interned at a psychotherapy lab, and I also was interning on a movie and TV show, and I was working at Barnes and Noble at the same time. Okay,
Wow.
so yeah, during that process. Um, during that process, one of my other friends who was there from college was a publicity assistant at St. Martin's Press at the time Emily Giffen's first book came out, something borrowed. Okay, and so I spoiler alert, since then I've read every single book. I've gone to every book signing she has, but I was sitting there. I loved her. I loved the book. And in her book talk, I was like, I want to do this. I want to write about romance and relationships. And my friend who was the publicity assistant was named Jennifer Tabor Vanderwerken. And Amazon my book's supposed to come out tomorrow, but Amazon just like sent it out last week to everybody who ordered on Amazon. Like all the other bookstores held it. Um, but that turned out to be fortuitous because she held it up, tagged Emily Giffen, and was like told that story. And then Emily Giffen reposted it. And then I private messaged Emily Giffen. She let me send her a book. So I hope she likes it. So that was full circle. But okay, from there, I wrote a book there that went, at that time, I got what I thought was like an agent, not really agent, went nowhere. I wrote another book, went nowhere. Then my third book, I got a really good agent, but it got rejected. And then I switched kind of to YA rom-com. I had my current agents, Jane Starts and Dorothy Vickery. They're the most wonderful woman. Um, and we wrote a book right when my oldest son, who's now 7, we shopped around and I got a chance at like a really big publishing house to do a rewrite with like a really big editor.
Mhm.
And I tried to do that 2, 3 weeks postpartum, and I
Oh,
definitely
wow.
definitely made it worse.
Yeah.
Um, as they told me. And so that was dead in the water. And then now this one, now here we are. And this one, and now,
And
yeah.
this one, same agent,
Yeah,
same
same
publisher?
agents. Yes. No, different publisher. It's a Bancroft Press, which is an independent press. But same agents, yes. And then
Mhm.
I have, as you know, Kathleen, my wonderful publicist too. So Bancroft, Dorothy, and Jane, and Kathleen. That's the team.
What draws you to YA?
Well, my when I was writing more like chick lit. What used to be called chick lit now is women's commercial fiction, I guess. Is that one of my friends just pointed out that maybe my friend Julie, who's one of my best friends, pointed out, she's like, maybe you should try YA because, you know, you do write that young voice well. You know, love high school drama. So, but and so she kind of pointed out, I was like, oh yeah, I'll give it a try. And then you get the family dynamics more. So I thought that was really fun. But I think my next one will be, maybe YA more crossover, like maybe even this is upper YA, but maybe a little more upper YA. But um, turns out a lot of people like YA. If you just say YA, it does close some doors, it turns out, for what people want. So I was like, it's interesting to find out about the publishing industry that way, right?
Yeah, yeah, it is interesting, but so many people read YA.
I know, and adults
Like,
will like the summer I turned pretty. All these adults
yeah,
read YA, especially this book. The adults will like. I think this book. They can read it with their
yes,
teenage daughter, or.
yeah, 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 there's something for everyone in
Yeah.
YA.
Yeah.
Have you always written? Have you always been a writer?
I think I always was a storyteller more. I think I used to put on plays all the time. So I used to everyone, like my sister I have a sister who I'm very close to who's the best, but she was definitely forced to be in plays from the time she was an infant to through life. But I used to, and my cousins and my friends, I was constantly making people enact plays that I directed, whether people wanted me to be the director or not. You know,
Yeah.
in my book, Annabelle has a learning disability, and
Mhm.
in elementary school I also struggled with a learning disability. And luckily, my dad is a child psychologist, my mom is a therapist, and they handled it so amazingly. I don't know where I'd be without that, but I really was able to overcome it. And by the time I was in college, I was on the dean's list every semester. But I think there were some those like that transformation probably affected my relationship with writing. Where maybe at that time it was easier for me to do more of like I also always loved musical theater, love it. I'm tone deaf, but I love it. And so I think maybe it was easier for me to represent stories that way at that time.
And so when did you, because now you've obviously written a lot. So
Yeah.
when did you realize, when did you make that sort of switch from plays to actually like sitting down and writing that first novel?
It was really like that weekend after I went to the Emily Giffin book talk in
Yeah.
Union Square, Barnes and Noble. I was like, I want to do this. And then I was like, I'm gonna write this. I'm gonna be a New York Times bestseller. And we'll see what happens from there. I was 22, I'm 40 now. So uh, yeah. So I think my daydreaming helps too, because I'm always like, this is what will happen when I'm a published author. And you kind of need that fantasy to keep going. So yeah, so that's kind of what I kind of thought I'd write a book and I'd be, you know, a success right away.
But now you are a published
Yes,
author.
now I am. Yeah. 20 short years later, here I am.
Well, what advice would you have for people who were still on the other side of it, where you were a couple
Yeah.
months ago,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
before this book came out?
I have several. I think my main advice is that, like, and I kind of this process somehow never got me down. I think it's because I, was like remained hopeful, but also because I had a lot of other things in my life. I had a career I'm passionate about. I have an amazing group of female friends. I think there's nothing more important in life than female friendships. Um,
Mhm.
and having a big group of female friends, it doesn't even have to be big, but just enough people who really see you and are close to you in that special way of like that female friendship. And having hobbies, and like I also run, not like on track, but I run you know several times a week, and having other interests is just so important, because otherwise I think this could make you feel just so down, and you can have your whole self-worth wrapped up in one thing. So I think that's my main advice, is to keep trying, keep trying, but also keep your life and plate full.
What does it feel like now that you're published, though?
So it feels great, but now I'm doing, I think I'm in a bit of I'm doing something I would never let my patients do, which, I wish I didn't know about this, but I think my publisher, Bancroft, told me, oh, you can look at your Amazon rankings. I was like, what? And so, between every patient now, I go and refresh my Amazon ranking. So I think, it's so wonderful and special. I'm so excited for this process, but, I talk for a living, so I just had to get on social media recently, and which has been fun and awkward for
Mm.
everyone. And just, you're learning new tricks of the trade, the relate, like I didn't know what NetGalley was, right? And now I know. And and so there's all these new things I'm learning about, which is really interesting. And it's like this world that's a little more Wild West than other worlds I've been in. And so it's just really, you know,
A
like it's,
wild ride.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, the whole publicity part of it
yeah,
seems kind of crazy, and sort of against how most writers naturally are. I feel like a
right,
lot of writers
right.
are sort of natural introverts, and so to then be getting out and doing all of this publicity once you've finished a book feels
Right. Yes. And that's why
in opposition.
yeah, I'm so grateful I have Kathleen, because she can shepherd me. She's an expert. So I'm like so glad she can shepherd me. But you know, and it's shameless. You have to be shameless. The things I've asked people to do for me in the last 2 months is like is so awkward, and you have to be really shameless. And and so that's been really interesting, right? To watch myself do this, become used to it, so
Yeah.
it's interesting. Yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
being a mom kind of prepared me for it, because at my son's school, I'm the volunteer coordinator for the PTA, and I basically have to harass people on the playground and at pick up and drop off to fulfill different volunteer slots, and that's kind of embarrassing. So it's like that was my training ground.
I
For
love that. I
yeah,
was just kind of thinking, I was thinking about that a little bit, like, yeah, it feels like when you're having to solicit for, yeah,
yeah,
mom time. You
yeah.
really learn how to be shameless when you're a parent in many, many, many ways. What does your writing routine look like?
It looks like chaos. It looks like 10 o'clock at night, after whatever bedtime, cleaning up, and then sitting down with like the most unhealthy snack, like espresso, bowl of M&Ms, a seltzer, some other form of chocolate, and like just grind. It's a grind. I mean, some people love writing and some people love having written. I love having written, for sure. I
Mm.
think there's really special moments, and it's really fun to write the moments between Anna and Gabe, and the romance moments are very fun, and sometimes it is just sparking, and you're like, I love this. Then the next day you're like, this is terrible. But so I think and I don't outline, right? So I
That
actually
was gonna
figured,
be my next question. Do you sort of know where you're going and have a destination in mind when you sit down at your desk to write, or do you just like to see where it takes you?
I know it's going to end happily. I would never write a book that doesn't end happily. I would never write a non-literary book that didn't end happily because I feel like literary books should end however and like make us awoke to whatever. But
Mhm.
for a beach read to not end happily, I feel tortured by, so I will not. But the I think I I actually heard Jenny Han in an interview talk about this, and I adapted this. Like she's talking about just writing a scene wherever you sat down, you like write a scene, and then you peel back the onion, and it comes together. I do it not quite that extreme, but that's how I do it sometimes. If I can't think of what's right next, I'll write a scene I'm excited about in the future.
Mhm.
Um, and and I do try to stay linear. And then often when I'm on a run or in the shower, I'll have plot points come to me and a theme that will draw through, and that will come. And that's a really fun moment when you're like something clicks and like that's where I was going, or that's the theme I was looking for, right?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and then
What is it about the shower and exercise? I feel like that those 2 things, something about like moving your body and being in the shower is sometimes I'll feel like I don't even need to take a shower at that moment, but I am stuck. And so I'm like, let me just go take a shower.
absolutely, yeah. I think it's like so there's like a lot of Eastern like Buddhism coming into Western psychology. And I think there are mindfulness elements like meditation and mindfulness because one thing you do when you use those in Western psychology, especially around distress tolerance, is that you call on the five senses or you get your heart rate up. And that centers you to the here and now. So I think that might be what it is, but I'm not sure.
I need the therapist point of view on
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
it.
yeah. Five senses change, like to the hot or cold shower changes your mood and can alter you, and heart rate up, it actually centers you and is like lowers anxiety, it lowers depression. So I think it makes you kind of more present with things,
I
would
love
be the psychological understanding, I think.
I love it. Do you have a specific time? Like, do you write every night? Are you sitting down with, the espresso and the M&Ms and M's and the seltzer, like
I think it
at a
depends.
certain time or
It depends on where I am in the process. Like if I'm when I once the book got picked up and I was doing revisions, I was doing it Saturday and Sunday, and like that was more regimented. Uh,
Mhm.
I think I think I tried probably to do it like 4 nights a week, you know.
Yeah, that's great though, like keeping to it and really keeping pushing forward always. Why are rom-coms important?
I think and I kind of touched on this. I think that
Mhm.
I think that like a lot of life, even like even really wonderful parts of life are inherently complicated, right? Like
Yeah.
think about a wedding, right? The amount when my patients are getting married, I know I'm going to be talking to I know that no one's missing an appointment for that whole year because it's so great and they're excited that all the family dynamics, right? All the friend dynamics, right? That so even in these really happy moments, there's these nuances that come up. There's these dynamics that come up. And I think both recognizing the humor in those, right? So they don't feel as heavy, and also giving a space again where there's structure and joy and happiness and laughter is just really important. Like we live in kind of a scary times, right? I guess it's always
Mhm.
scary times throughout history, but I think just for me growing up and even now, like the power of like escape in a rom-com novel or movie is just it just always like kind of fills me with joy, and I want to give that. And my dream would be to have someone reading this book, like not being able to go to bed 2 in the morning reading this book. That is it would definitely be a dream of mine.
I love that. And with that, I will pose to you our traditional last question, which is when Running Mates is made into a movie or series, what do you think the theme song should be?
Oh, the theme song. Okay. You know what? I this is the song I listen to. This is a song. Okay, this is so embarrassing. It shows how bad my music taste is, but I somehow time listen to the Spotify coffee house mix a lot. Like yeah.
I totally get that.
Okay. My sister's cringing somewhere in DC. She's and I found this random song called Oh Love. and it's by, I might have to look this up, Parit. And I can quickly look up the last name, Parit. Um, let's see if I have it. Is that, and oh yeah, here it is. It's Prateek, Prateek, Kuhad, Kuhad, O love. And for some reason that I heard that on that Spotify mix, and I was playing it over and over and over again while I was writing it and on runs. And it just, for something about it, I don't even know why. I'm like, this is the song of my book.
I love that. And now I'm going to go find that song and listen to it. Emily, thank you so much for coming on. It has been a pleasure talking to you, and congratulations on the debut. And may there be many more after this
Thank
one
you
as
so much.
well.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun and wonderful. I so appreciate you having a debut author on too.
It's
Thank you.
been great. Thank you. Thanks for joining us on Literary Prospects. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. We'll see you next time.